The New York Islanders have an impossible decision to make with the first overall pick in the NHL draft, and new information has certainly added clarity to this situation. But regardless, the New York Islanders are going to have to make their decision off a very small sample size. We're going to break it all down on this episode of Islanders Digest. But before we do that, I want to quickly point out this chart. We noticed that 85.4% of you are not yet subscribed to the channel. So if you're an Islander fan and you want more Islanders content just like this, what are you waiting for? Thank you to 14.7% of you who are already subscribed to the channel. Your support means a lot. Now let's talk about it. I mean, the first overall pick is coming up for the New York Islanders, and they have a tough decision to make as Mathew Schaefer played a small amount of games this season. This is really a situation where a team has not been put in a while. For the past few seasons, there have been unanimous choices for the first overall pick, and even when there wasn't, where you had a full sample size to look at for that player in their draft eligible year, the Islanders do not have that luxury with Mathew Schaefer, but we do have an encouraging update, which will perhaps make the Islanders' decision a little bit easier. Nothing is going to help them get a larger sample size on this player. The Islanders are going to have to deal with the games he played this year and also the games he played in previous seasons. That is something I do want to emphasize. There have been a lot of people criticizing him for jumping up so many spots and really making fun of scouts, saying they don't know what they're doing for ranking these players. Scouts don't just watch these players in their draft year. They see how they develop from year to year, and every year they do have a checklist to see what they're looking for them, to see them elevate their game and really elevate their stock as a prospect. Mathew Schaefer, in the short sample size he did play this year, did do that. I do want to note, for people criticizing draft experts who now have him first overall over Long Island native James Higgins, you do got to keep in mind that these same draft experts that you're criticizing now are the same draft experts who originally had Higgins at first overall. So I do just want to point that out. This video, we're not really going to be focusing on Higgins because, as I've said in previous videos, if the Islanders do keep the first overall pick and select first overall, which I personally believe they are going to do, we're still not sure until we get a GM, but I'm pretty sure that's what they're going to do. They're going to pick one of two players, and it is not going to be Higgins. Now, the news we really want to focus on here with Mathew Schaefer is since May 1st, we now know he has been completely cleared to play hockey. The shoulder is now 100%. He did have surgery to repair a broken clavicle. He is now perfectly healthy, and this is assuring for the New York Islanders making this decision. And frankly, there really is not much for the Islanders to worry about in terms of injury with Schaefer. Sure, you do have to really focus on that small sample size, and that can still be a concern, as we're going to talk about in just a little bit. But in terms of the player's health, he said, "I'm healed, I'm working out, I'm on the ice, so everything is amazing," which is good. In fact, he almost came back for the OHL playoffs. If the London Knights had not swept his team, he would have come back, and it would have been really interesting to really see him play again. I think that would have perhaps shut down really the discussions when it comes to this player, because as some scouts have said, if Mathew Schaefer had played a full season, we probably would not be having this conversation right now. We would probably know he was going first overall. That's how good he was. That's how far he elevated his game this season, and we do have to keep that in mind. Now, we also want to talk a little bit about some of the other things that happened to Schaefer this season, because there have been some reports talking about how he's been injury prone this season, and the injury to his clavicle was not the first injury he suffered this season. This is actually incorrect. Schaefer did miss a few games earlier this season, but it was because he was dealing with mono. So honestly, I think it's even more impressive that he was recovering from mono in those first few games he came back, where he looked so dominant. This is really an incredible player, and frankly, I would be so glad if the Islanders select Mathew Schaefer. We're going to talk about why this is a tough decision, and I will admit, it is a difficult decision for them to make, because there is another player, as we all know, who really also deserves consideration for the first overall pick, who played a full season and really had a dominant year. But there's just so much to like with Schaefer. And I do want to note, when talking about that clavicle injury, I read a report that apparently even after you break your clavicle, there's only a 0.07% chance that you ever break it again. So really, this is a non-factor for the decision. Now that he's perfectly healed and everything has gone well, he's working out, the Islanders are going to have a chance to see his strength in the combine, which is definitely going to add a little more insight to this decision. But in reality, what the Islanders do need, or what the Islanders would like, is a few more games to watch him play, and unfortunately that's not going to happen. If he had just healed a week or two sooner, we could have seen him in the under 18 tournament and seen him play for the Erie Otters in the playoffs. And I really think, again, that would have closed this conversation up. Still, looking at the numbers, his season was very impressive, especially when you add on the fact that he was recovering from mono in the beginning of this year playing these games. In 17 games, he put up 22 points. And you got to keep in mind, this is a defenseman, and he is already showing he has the offense. And that's something you really got to note with these defensive prospects. A lot of times, the offense comes later. This is something we saw with Noah Dobson, where most scouts believed the offense would be there. But in his draft year, he hadn't completely blown up. Schaefer was really dominating games offensively and defensively while he played this season. Unfortunately, he hurt himself in the World Junior Classic, the World Junior 20 Classic. I do want to keep in mind he was playing with the 20-year-olds where he put up 2 points in 2 games, but he did get hurt. If you watch the video, he falls into the post. So really unfortunate because, if Schaefer played this full season, I don't think we're really having these conversations about who goes first overall. And again, I want to emphasize, this is a player that scouts have been watching for years, and it's not like he came out of nowhere. I know the name kind of popped up out of nowhere first overall for people who have not been watching all season long or who don't regularly keep up to date with the lottery rankings. And why would you? I mean, the Islanders were not really in serious lottery contention until really the end. And even then, they moved up 10 spots. So I think a lot of fans really weren't paying attention. We knew from the previous year that James Higgins was first overall, but Schaefer was always around the top 5, top 3, like in that range. And scouts had a few questions on whether or not he could bring the offense to his game. The skating was there, all the tools were there, and he showed in these 17 games and these 2 games in the World Junior Classic that he does have that offense. And for me, I think that's enough. I think Schaefer is a first overall pick. Yes, you do got to be careful, especially considering he only played 17 games. But just watching the way he played in those 17 games, defensemen that skate this well are extremely rare. And the Islanders, if they select Schaefer, are looking at a potential franchise defenseman. Still, the choice really becomes difficult, and I don't think it would be difficult if it was not for Michael Misa. Michael Misa has had an absolutely dominant season. He also had OHL exceptional status. This is his 3rd year dominating the OHL, which gives you even more sample size to be assured that this is an incredible player. And other than Michael Misa, I know a lot of Islander fans do like James Higgins, and I love the story, but he just is not on the level of Schaefer. With Michael Misa in the conversation, it does make this a little more challenging for the New York Islanders. Because while Schaefer, what he showed in his 17 games this season was so impressive, it has so many scouts just raving about him. He's pretty much a consensus first overall pick. But with Michael Misa, in 65 games in the OHL, 62 goals, 72 assists, and really building off 2 previous years in the OHL where he was a point per game in all 3 seasons, including in the season where he was granted exceptional status. He's the only player in this draft who has 3 seasons in the OHL. And keeping that in mind and how well he's played, it makes this decision challenging for the Islanders, because I honestly think with Michael Misa, you know exactly what you're going to get. You're getting a first-line center. There's no question he's a second-line center or anything like that. He is a first-line center who could also provide offense right away for the New York Islanders. How much offense, that would have to be seen. But this is a player who's ready to play in the NHL right now, where realistically Schaefer, especially considering that he only played 17 games in the OHL, I think if he had a full season in the OHL, he would be ready to go right away. But because he only played a few games, it's very likely that it's best for his development to play another full season in the OHL where he can really define that offense. I mean, while I do think, especially with the skating, Schaefer does, and the frame, Schaefer does have the skill to play in the NHL. However, the last thing you'd want to do as the Islanders is really rush him up too early and prevent him from really developing the full potential of his offensive game. Because as we've said, that takes a little bit longer with players. I think in general, forwards are quicker to develop. And because of that, we just have more information on who Michael Misa is going to be as a player. And he's going to be a very good player. However, in my personal opinion, I'd love to know your thoughts on this in the comments. I feel like the potential with Schaefer is too much for the New York Islanders to pass up on. Personally, I think despite the small sample size, the Islanders should draft Mathew Schaefer. Still, I'd love to know your thoughts on who they should pick in the comments below and why. As always, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the channel. My name is Patrick Nilan. This is Islanders Digest. Let's go Islanders.